This isn't just a romance. This is a war. Buckle up. The silence in the master bedroom wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. It was the kind of silence that screams. Audrey sat on the edge of the California king bed, her fingers trembling as she clutched the envelope from the fertility clinic. Primary ovarian insufficiency. The words felt like a death sentence. In the world of the Callaways, women weren't people. They were incubators. If you couldn't produce the next CEO of Callaway Logistics, you were a depreciating asset. The door flew open. It wasn't a gentle entrance. It was Preston Callaway, her husband of 3 years. He was handsome in that sharp, jagged way, blonde hair perfectly coiffed, a suit that cost more than most people's cars, and eyes that were currently devoid of any warmth. "Well," Preston demanded, not even stepping fully into the room. He checked his watch. "I have a dinner with the board in an hour. Audrey, don't waste my time." Audrey looked up, tears stinging her eyes. "Preston, the results came back. It's not good." She held out the paper. He snatched it, scanning the medical jargon. His face didn't fall in sadness. It twisted in disgust. He crumpled the paper in his fist and threw it at her. It bounced harmlessly off her chest, but it felt like a slap. "I knew it," he spat. "I knew you were defective." "Defective," Audrey whispered, standing up. "Preston, I'm your wife. We can look at other options. Adoption, surrogacy." Adoption. Preston laughed, a cold, barking sound. "You think a Callaway raises someone else's genetic garbage? My mother was right about you. You're just a pretty face with a broken interior." He walked to the closet and started pulling out suitcases. Her suitcases. "Preston, what are you doing?" Panic rose in her throat. "I'm cutting my losses. Audrey, the prenup is clear. Clause 14, B. Failure to produce an heir within 3 years allows for an annulment of the marriage contract with a minimal severance. You're done." "You can't be serious," she cried, grabbing his arm. He shook her off violently, sending her stumbling back against the vanity. "We promised, for better or worse." That was for the cameras. "Darling." A new voice chimed in. Audrey froze. Leaning against the doorframe was Jessica Thorpe. She was Preston's personal assistant, a leggy brunette who had been smiling a little too brightly at Preston for months. She was holding a glass of champagne. "Jessica," Audrey breathed. "Pack your things." "Sweetie," Jessica said, taking a sip. "Preston and I need the closet space, and unlike you, everything works just fine with me." She placed a hand demonstratively over her flat stomach. The cruelty was so absolute, so casual, that Audrey went numb. She didn't fight as Preston threw clothes haphazardly into the bags. She didn't scream when he dragged the luggage down the marble staircase, the wheels clunking loudly, echoing through the empty mansion. Beatrice Callaway, Preston's mother, was waiting in the foyer, the matriarch of the family, a woman who wore pearls like armor. She didn't look at Audrey. She just signaled to the butler to open the front door. "Get her out," Beatrice said, examining her fingernails, "and change the locks immediately. I don't want her selling stories to the press." "Preston, please," Audrey begged one last time as he shoved her out onto the stone steps. The November rain was freezing, instantly soaking her silk blouse. "Where am I supposed to go?" "You cut off my credit cards this morning." "Not my problem," Preston said. He looked at her with pure indifference. "You should have thought about that before you turned out to be barren." The heavy oak doors slammed shut. The click of the deadbolt was the loudest sound Audrey had ever heard. She stood there for 5 minutes, shivering, the rain mixing with her tears. She dragged her 2 suitcases down the long driveway to the main road. It was dark, the streetlights were flickering, and she was alone in one of the wealthiest, coldest neighborhoods in America. She sat on her suitcase, her head in her hands. She was 26 years old. She had no degree. She had dropped out to marry Preston. She had no savings. She was a discard. Headlights swept over her. Bright, blinding, LED lights. Audrey didn't look up, assuming it was security coming to chase her further away. But the car slowed. The hum of a powerful engine purred to a stop right in front of her. She looked up. It wasn't a security patrol. It was a matte black Rolls-Royce Phantom, the kind of car even Preston couldn't afford. The rear window glided down. Sitting inside was a man who looked like he was carved out of shadows and granite. He had dark hair, eyes the color of steel, and a scar running faintly through his left eyebrow. He was wearing a tuxedo, unbuttoned at the collar. Audrey knew who he was. Everyone in Chicago knew who he was, though people whispered his name rather than spoke it. Dominic Rossi, the head of the Rossi Syndicate, the man who owned half the construction unions and all of the shipping docks, the man the FBI had been trying to pin down for a decade. Dominic looked at her. He didn't look at her wet clothes or her ruined makeup. He looked straight into her eyes, with an intensity that made her forget the cold. The door opened. A massive bodyguard with an umbrella stepped out, but Dominic waved him off. He leaned forward from the back seat. "Audrey Calloway," he said. His voice was deep, rough like gravel. "It's just Audrey now," she stammered, shivering violently. Dominic's eyes narrowed as he looked up at the Calloway mansion, then back at her trembling form. He saw the suitcases. He saw the lack of a coat. A flash of something dangerous passed over his face, not anger at her, but a cold, calculated fury at the situation. He extended a hand, a large, warm hand. "Get in," he said. I can't," Audrey whispered. "I don't know you. You're Dominic Rossi, and you are freezing to death on a curb while your husband toasts to his freedom," Dominic said calmly. "I'm not asking you for a date. Audrey, I'm offering you a weapon. A weapon, revenge," Dominic said softly. "It's a dish best served cold, but you look cold enough already. Come with me." Audrey looked back at the house. The lights were warm and golden. She could see shadows moving in the window, Preston and Jessica. She looked back at Dominic Rossi's hand. She took it. The drive was silent. The interior of the Rolls-Royce smelled like leather and expensive scotch. Audrey was shivering uncontrollably, her teeth chattering. Without a word, Dominic had taken off his tuxedo jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It was heavy and warm, carrying his scent, wood smoke, and something sharp, like ozone. He didn't try to make small talk. He didn't ask her, "Are you okay?" which she appreciated, because she clearly wasn't. He spent the ride typing on a secure phone, his face illuminated by the screen. When they arrived at Rossi Tower, the tallest building in the city skyline, they bypassed the lobby. The car drove directly into a private underground elevator bank. "Franco," Dominic said to the driver, "get her bags." They rode the elevator to the 91st floor. When the doors opened, Audrey gasped. The penthouse wasn't a home. It was a fortress of glass and steel. The view of Chicago was breathtaking, the city lights spreading out like a galaxy below them. You'll stay here, Dominic said, walking over to a wet bar and pouring 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal glass. He turned and held it out to her. Drink. It will stop the shaking. Audrey took the glass with 2 hands. She took a sip and coughed as the liquor burned her throat. But the warmth spread quickly to her chest. Why? She asked, her voice raspy. Why did you pick me up? You're a mob boss. Dominic, you don't do charity. Dominic leaned against the marble counter, crossing his arms. The muscles in his forearms shifted under his dress shirt. You're right. I don't do charity. I do investments. I have nothing to invest, Audrey said bitterly. I'm barren. I'm broke. I'm a high school dropout who was just thrown away. You are the wife of Preston Calloway, Dominic corrected. Ex-wife, or soon-to-be. That means you know things, Dominic said, his eyes locking onto hers. Preston Calloway isn't just a logistics mogul. He's been moving product for the cartels through his shipping lanes. He's been laundering money, and he's been stepping on my territory. Audrey's eyes widened. Preston, no. He's cruel, but he's a legitimate businessman. He worries about board meetings and stock prices. Dominic smirked. It was a dark, humorless smile. The best criminals always look like saints, Audrey. Preston has been using your name, actually. My name, the Audrey Foundation, his charity for underprivileged youth. It's a wash for dirty money. If the feds investigate him, guess whose name is on the paperwork? Audrey felt the room spin. She dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor, sending shards of crystal and scotch everywhere. He made me sign papers. He said it was just for tax purposes. He said he was proud of me. He was setting you up as the fall guy, Dominic said ruthlessly. Why do you think he was so desperate to kick you out tonight? The feds are circling. He needs to distance himself from you before the indictment drops. He's going to pin it all on the disgruntled ex-wife who was stealing from the charity. Audrey fell to her knees. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was criminal. Preston wasn't just leaving her. He was planning to send her to prison. Dominic walked over. He didn't help her up immediately. He crouched down so they were eye level. He ignored the broken glass near his expensive shoes. You have 2 choices, Audrey, Dominic said quietly. Choice A. You walk out that door. The police pick you up in 24 hours. You go to prison for 20 years for money laundering and fraud. Preston plays the grieving victim who was deceived by his infertile, greedy wife. Audrey sobbed, a raw sound of despair. Or choice B, Dominic continued, his voice dropping an octave. You stay here. You tell me everything you know about his schedule, his passwords, his private meetings. You become my wife. Audrey's head snapped up. What? Not a real marriage, Dominic said, standing up and offering her his hand again. A war alliance. I need a legitimate face to enter certain social circles Preston controls. You need protection and power. I make you Mrs. Rossi. We destroy Preston Calloway, piece by piece. We take his company. We ruin his reputation. And we leave him with nothing. Why marry me? She asked. You could just hire me. Because, Dominic's eyes glinted. Nothing terrifies a man like Preston more than seeing his broken toy in the hands of a man he fears. It sends a message. It says you are under my protection, and nobody touches what is mine. Audrey looked at the man. He was dangerous. He was a killer. Probably. But Preston, the man she had loved, was a monster in a suit. Preston had tried to destroy her life. Dominic was offering her a sword to fight back. She stood up, wiping the tears from her face. Her expression hardened. The naive girl who cried on the curb was dying, and something colder was taking her place. "I want him to hurt," Audrey whispered. "I want him to feel as small as I felt tonight." "He will," Dominic promised. "But first, you need to sleep. And tomorrow, we go shopping. If you're going to be the Queen of Chicago, you can't wear last season's tears." He gestured to a hallway. "Second door on the left is your suite. Lock the door if it makes you feel safer. But in this house, nobody hurts you. Good night, Audrey." He turned to leave, but Audrey called out, "Dominic!" He paused. "Did you know?" she asked. "About tonight. Did you know he was kicking me out?" Dominic didn't turn around. "I've been watching the Calloway house for 6 months. Audrey, I knew he was making a move. I just didn't expect him to be stupid enough to do it in the rain." He walked away. Audrey went to the room. It was bigger than her entire apartment before she met Preston. She showered, scrubbing the feeling of Preston's touch off her skin. She put on a silk robe she found in the closet. It still had the tags on. Rossi guessed. She lay in the massive bed, staring at the ceiling. She wasn't sad anymore. She was angry. But there was one thing neither of them knew yet. The next morning, Audrey would wake up with a strange nausea. She would chalk it up to the stress and the whiskey. She wouldn't know, not for another few weeks, that the fertility clinic had made a mistake. Or perhaps the clinic hadn't made a mistake at all. Perhaps Preston had paid the doctor to falsify the results to have an excuse to dump her. Audrey Calloway wasn't infertile, and she was already carrying the heir Preston wanted so badly, but now that child would be raised in the house of his greatest enemy. Audrey woke up to the sound of rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows. For a split second, she thought she was back in the guest room of the Calloway estate, waiting for Preston to come home and ignore her. Then she saw the gunmetal grey walls, the unfamiliar abstract art, and the heavy silk sheets. She was in the lion's den. There was a knock on the door. A woman in a sharp navy suit entered, pushing a rolling rack of clothes. She looked efficient, severe, and expensive. "Good morning, Mrs. Calloway," the woman said, her voice clipped. "Or should I say, the future Mrs. Rossi, I am Elena. Mr. Rossi has hired me to facilitate your transition." Audrey sat up, clutching the sheet. Her head pounded. "Transition. Mr. Rossi has a busy schedule. We have a marriage license appointment at City Hall at 2:00 p.m. Before that, we have work to do. He instructed me to burn everything you arrived with." Audrey looked at her 2 suitcases in the corner. "But those are all I have left." "They are the clothes of a victim," Elena said, opening the garment bag on the rack. "Mr. Rossi does not marry victims. He marries queens." Elena pulled out a dress. It was a structured, blood-red sheath dress by Alexander McQueen. It looked less like clothing and more like a weapon. "Get dressed," Elena commanded. "Dominic is waiting in the library." Audrey showered and dressed. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The red dress hugged curves she usually hid. Her pale skin looked porcelain against the crimson fabric. She applied her own makeup, sharp eyeliner, dark lips. She looked dangerous. She found Dominic in the library, a room that smelled of old paper and cigar smoke. He was on the phone, speaking rapid-fire Italian. When he saw her, he stopped mid-sentence. He hung up without saying goodbye. He walked over to her, circling her slowly like a predator inspecting a new territory. "Better," he said, his voice low. "But you're still trembling." "I'm terrified," Audrey admitted, lifting her chin defiantly. "I'm about to marry a man I met on a curb 12 hours ago." "Fear keeps you sharp," Dominic said. He walked to his desk and slid a contract across the mahogany surface. "Read it." Audrey picked it up. "Prenuptial agreement." She scanned the pages. It wasn't like the one Preston had made her sign, which stripped her of everything. This one was different. Clause 4. In exchange for the consolidation of the Callaway assets. Clause 9. Audrey gains 10% ownership of Rossi Construction upon marriage. "You're giving me shares in your company?" she asked, shocked. "I need you to have skin in the game," Dominic said, pouring himself an espresso. "This isn't just a marriage, it's a merger. Preston thinks you're weak. He thinks you're stupid. When we walk into his gala tonight, I want him to know you aren't just my wife, you're my partner." "Tonight?" Audrey's breath hitched. "The Callaway Foundation gala is tonight. I can't go there. Preston will be there. Jessica will be there." "Exactly." Dominic smiled. It was the smile of a wolf. "That is why we are going, to announce our engagement." "They'll destroy me," Audrey whispered. "Preston has the press in his pocket. He'll spin it that I cheated on him." Dominic stepped close, invading her personal space. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jawline. His touch was electric, terrifying and thrilling all at once. "Let him try," Dominic murmured. "You are under the Rossi banner now. If he lies about you, I buy the newspaper. If he insults you, I break his jaw. If he touches you..." Dominic's eyes went pitch black. "I burn his city down." He pulled a velvet box from his pocket and snapped it open. Inside sat a diamond that made her previous wedding ring look like costume jewelry. It was an emerald-cut, flawless diamond, at least 5 carats, set in platinum. "This belonged to my grandmother," Dominic said, sliding it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "She was a Mafia wife. She survived 3 wars and 2 assassination attempts. She died peacefully in her bed at 90. He looked her in the eye. "Wear it, Audrey, and stop shaking. You're safe." Audrey looked at the ring. It felt heavy. It felt real. "Okay," she said, her voice steadying. "Let's go get married." The annual Callaway Foundation Gala was the highlight of the Chicago social calendar. It was a sea of black ties, designer gowns, and fake smiles. Preston Callaway stood at the center of the ballroom, a glass of champagne in hand. Jessica Thorpe was on his arm, wearing a silver dress that was far too revealing for a charity event. She was beaming, playing the role of the doting partner perfectly. "You handled the Audrey situation beautifully, darling," Jessica whispered in his ear. "The press release went out this morning. Audrey Callaway steps down due to health issues and personal instability. Everyone is already pitying you." Preston smirked. "She was weak. She won't fight back. She's probably crying in a Motel 6 right now." "Mr. Callaway." A reporter from the Chicago Tribune approached. "Is it true about the divorce? We heard rumors of infidelity." Preston put on a sad face. "It's a private matter. Audrey has been struggling for a long time. We just want her to get the help she needs." Suddenly, the murmur in the room stopped. It didn't taper off. It was severed. The live jazz band faltered and went silent. Heads turned toward the grand double doors at the top of the staircase. "What is going on?" Preston snapped, looking around. Then he saw why. Dominic Rossi stood at the top of the stairs. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, tailored by Brioni. He looked lethal and magnificent. But no one was looking at Dominic. They were looking at the woman on his arm. Audrey. She was wearing the blood-red Alexander McQueen gown. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, exposing the diamond necklace dripping from her throat. But the most blinding thing was the ring on her left hand. She didn't look like the crying woman Preston had thrown out. She looked like a goddess of vengeance. "Is that Audrey?" Jessica gasped, her grip on Preston's arm tightening painfully. Dominic leaned down to Audrey as they stood at the top of the stairs, the entire room staring up at them. "Breathe," he whispered. "Head high. You own this room." Audrey took a deep breath. She locked eyes with Preston across the ballroom. She saw his jaw drop. She saw the fear flicker in his eyes. She smiled. They descended the stairs. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Flashbulbs erupted, blinding and chaotic. Mr. Rossi, is this your date?" "Mrs. Calloway, are you with Dominic Rossi?" Dominic held up a hand, silencing the reporters. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs, right in front of Preston and Jessica. The tension was thick enough to choke on. "Preston," Audrey said. Her voice was cool, clear, and carried through the silent room. "Lovely party. I see you didn't waste time replacing me." She glanced at Jessica, then back to Preston. "Though I suppose downgrading is the more accurate term." A ripple of shocked laughter went through the crowd. Jessica turned beet red. "What are you doing here? Audrey?" Preston hissed, his fake polite mask slipping. "You weren't invited. Security." "She is with me," Dominic said. His voice wasn't loud, but it resonated with a terrifying authority. "And I go where I please." Preston looked at Dominic, trying to muster his courage. "This is a private event. Rossi, you and your whore need to leave." The room gasped. Dominic didn't yell. He didn't strike. He simply stepped forward, towering over Preston. He adjusted his cufflinks calmly. "Careful." "Preston," Dominic said softly. "You are speaking to my fiancé." "Fiancé," Preston choked out. "You've been separated for 24 hours. Love moves fast," Dominic said dryly. "And so do lawyers. Audrey filed for divorce this morning on grounds of adultery and emotional abuse. My legal team, Cravath, Swain and Moore will be handling the proceedings. I suggest you get a good lawyer. You're going to need one." Preston paled. Dominic had hired the biggest firm in the country. "You can't do this," Preston sputtered. "She's barren. She's useless. Why would you want her?" Audrey felt a sharp pain in her chest at the words. But Dominic's arm tightened around her waist, anchoring her. "One man's trash is another man's treasure," Dominic said. "But in this case, Preston, you threw away a diamond because you were too stupid to know how to shine it. Now, if you'll excuse us, my fiancé and I have a dance to attend to." Dominic swept Audrey past the stunned couple and onto the dance floor. He signaled the band, and they nervously started playing a waltz. As they spun, Audrey felt the adrenaline crash. Her knees felt weak. "You did good," Dominic whispered against her hair. "He called me a whore," Audrey whispered, tears threatening to spill. "And tomorrow, his stock price will drop 10% because of the rumors I just started." Dominic replied, "Don't listen to him. Look at me." Audrey looked up into Dominic's steel-grey eyes. For a moment, the room disappeared. It was just the two of them. She felt safe, truly safe. Thank you, she breathed. Don't thank me yet, Dominic said. The war has just begun. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness hit Audrey. The lights of the chandelier blurred. The smell of the expensive hors d'oeuvres, truffle oil, and seared scallops suddenly made her stomach turn violently. Audrey, Dominic asked, stopping the dance. You're pale. I don't feel well, she mumbled. The room tilted. I think I'm going to... Her legs gave out. Dominic caught her before she hit the floor. He scooped her up into his arms effortlessly, shouting for his security detail. Get the car, Dominic roared, his calm facade shattering into panic. Move, get out of the way. Preston watched from the sidelines, a cruel sneer returning to his face. See, he told Jessica. Broken. She can't even handle a dance. But in the back of the Rolls-Royce, as they sped toward the private hospital Dominic owned, Audrey was drifting in and out of consciousness. She didn't know it yet. Dominic didn't know it yet. But inside her, a tiny heart was beating, a heart that carried Calloway DNA, but would be raised by a Rossi. The infertile woman was about to give the Mafia Don the one thing money couldn't buy, and the one thing Preston Calloway had destroyed his marriage for. An heir. The steady beep of the heart monitor was the first thing Audrey heard. It was a rhythmic, annoying sound that pulled her out of the darkness. She blinked, her eyes adjusting to the dim light of the luxury hospital suite. It looked more like a hotel room than a medical facility, with mahogany paneling and a view of the Chicago River. Dominic was there. He was sitting in a leather armchair in the corner, his tuxedo jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He was staring at a tablet, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. Dominic, she croaked. He was at her side in a second. He poured a glass of water and held the straw to her lips. Easy, he said, his voice unusually gentle. You took a hard fall. Did I ruin the gala? Audrey asked, panic rising in her chest. Did Preston win? Preston is currently dealing with a PR nightmare, Dominic said with a grim smile. Stocks in Calloway Logistics dropped 4% this morning. You fainting was the best thing that could have happened. Everyone thinks he poisoned you or stressed you into a collapse. The narrative is firmly on our side. Audrey relaxed back into the pillows. Good. What happened? Was it the stress? Dominic's face changed. The hard lines of the Mafia Don softened into something unreadable. He sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. Audrey, he said. The doctors ran a full panel. Blood work, scans, everything. And you're not sick. He paused, searching her eyes. You're pregnant. The world stopped. The air left the room. That's not funny, Audrey whispered. She pulled her hand away. Don't joke about that. You know why Preston threw me out. You saw the papers. I have primary ovarian insufficiency. I can't have children. The papers were a lie, Dominic said. His voice was cold, sharp steel. I had my own team review your file from the Calloway's private clinic. Then I had my doctors here run their own tests. Your reproductive system is perfectly healthy. You are 8 weeks along. Audrey stared at him. Tears welled up, hot and fast. But, Doctor, Arrington, he showed me the charts. He said my egg count was 0. Doctor, Arrington bought a vacation home in the Hamptons 3 days before he gave you that diagnosis. Dominic revealed, his jaw tightening. Preston paid him off. He didn't want a divorce that would cost him half his fortune. He needed a cause to annul the prenup. Infertility was the clause he triggered. Audrey felt like she was going to be sick again. It wasn't just cruelty, it was a conspiracy. Preston had gaslit her into believing she was broken, just to save money. He lied. She sobbed, clutching her stomach. He threw me out on the street, pregnant with his own child. He doesn't know, Dominic said. If Arrington is smart, he didn't tell Preston you were actually pregnant. He just took the money to fake the infertility results. Preston thinks you're barren. He has no idea there is an heir. Audrey looked down at her flat stomach. A baby she had wanted for 3 years. A baby that was now a pawn in a war. I have to tell him, Audrey said, panic rising. He's the father. He has rights. He has nothing, Dominic growled, standing up. The predator was back. He threw you out in the rain like garbage. He left his pregnant wife to freeze. He forfeited his rights the moment he locked that gate. He leaned over the bed, his hands bracing on the mattress on either side of her. Listen to me closely, Audrey. If Preston finds out the child is his, he will take it. He has judges in his pocket. He has lawyers who can twist reality. He will paint you as unstable, unfit, and he will take that baby to raise with Jessica. Do you want that woman raising your child? No, Audrey breathed, a primal fear gripping her heart. No, never. Then we lie, Dominic said. Lie. We get married. Immediately. And when the baby comes, the world will believe it is a Rossi, a miracle baby. My heir. But the timing, Audrey hesitated. 8 weeks. I have doctors who can fudge a due date, Dominic said dismissively. Babies come early all the time. We say it was a premature birth. We say it was a whirlwind romance. We control the narrative. He looked at her, his eyes burning with intensity. I will protect that child with my life, Audrey. It will carry my name. It will inherit my empire. And Preston will die of old age, never knowing he threw away his own legacy. Audrey looked at the man who had saved her. He was asking to raise another man's child as his own, purely to protect her and destroy his enemy. It was the most dangerous, romantic, and terrifying thing she had ever heard. She placed a hand on her stomach. She felt a fierce, burning resolve. Preston Calloway had wanted an heir. Well, he wasn't getting this one. Okay, Audrey whispered. Let's do it. The winter in Chicago had been brutal, but inside the glass-walled boardroom of Calloway Logistics, the temperature was sub-zero. Preston Calloway sat at the head of the table, looking like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. His suit was rumpled. There were dark circles under his eyes. Jessica Thorpe sat next to him, scrolling through her phone, looking bored and irritated. We are bleeding cash. Preston slammed his fist on the table. 3 shipments from Shanghai lost at the docks. The union strike in New Jersey has halted our distribution for a month. Who is doing this? His CFO, a nervous man named Mr. Henderson, adjusted his glasses. It's targeted, sir. Someone is systematically dismantling our supply chain, and the banks are calling in the loans. Which banks? All of them. JP Morgan, Citibank. They've sold your debt. Sold it to whom? Preston demanded. The heavy oak doors at the end of the room swung open. To us. A deep voice boomed. Dominic Rossi walked in. He was wearing a black cashmere coat over a charcoal suit. He looked like death itself, calm and inevitable. And beside him walked Audrey. She was visibly pregnant now. A small, perfect bump showed under her cream-colored Chanel maternity dress. She wore a coat of white mink, and her skin was glowing with health and happiness. She looked untouchable. Preston stood up so fast his chair toppled over. "You!" he seethed. "You can't be in here. Security." "I own the building. Preston," Dominic said, pulling out a chair for Audrey. She sat down gracefully, smoothing her dress over her stomach. "I bought the mortgage note from the bank this morning. Technically, you're trespassing." Preston stared at them, his eyes bulging. Then his gaze dropped to Audrey's stomach. He froze. "You're fat," he stammered. "Pregnant." "Preston," Audrey corrected, her voice dripping with sweet venom. 5 months. "That's impossible," Preston whispered. He looked at Jessica, then back at Audrey. "You're barren, Doctor," Arrington said. "Doctor, Arrington was a quack," Dominic interjected smoothly. Or maybe he just knew that stress was the problem. It's amazing what happens when a woman is treated like a queen instead of an incubator. Her body heals. Dominic placed a protective hand on Audrey's shoulder. "It seems my swimmers are just stronger than yours." "Calloway," Dominic smirked. "A Rossi air on the first try. A miracle, really." Preston turned a shade of purple that looked dangerous. That's my..." "Careful," Dominic warned, his voice dropping to a growl. "Finish that sentence, and I'll have you sued for defamation before you leave this room. We've been married for 3 months. The math works perfectly." It didn't. Not exactly. But Preston was too panicked to do the math. He was staring at the visible proof of everything he had wanted and thrown away. Jessica looked at Audrey's bump, then at Preston's red face. She stood up. "I'm leaving," Jessica announced. "What?" Preston spun around. "Jess, sit down." "You're broke." "Preston," Jessica said, grabbing her Birkin bag. "And you lied to me. You said she was the problem. Clearly, she wasn't. I'm not sinking with this ship." She walked out, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She didn't even look back. "Jessica," Preston shouted. "Let her go," Audrey said softly. "She was never with you for you. Preston, she was with you for the Calloway name, a name that is about to be worth nothing." Dominic tossed a file onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped in front of Preston. "The acquisition offer," Dominic said. "I'm buying Calloway Logistics. The fleet, the warehouses, the brand. I'll never sell to you," Preston spat. "Then I foreclose on the building tomorrow." Dominic shrugged. "I seize the assets to pay the debt you owe me. You go bankrupt. The SEC investigates the accounting errors I found in your files. You go to federal prison." Preston looked at the file. Then he looked at Audrey. He looked at the woman who had loved him, the woman he had discarded because he thought she was broken. Now, she held the keys to his freedom, and she was carrying a child that deep down he suspected might be his, but he couldn't prove it. He had no power. "If I sign," Preston whispered, defeated. "What do I get?" "You get to stay out of jail," Audrey said. "You get a one-way ticket to a non-extradition country. Maybe Belize. I hear it's nice this time of year. And the company?" "It becomes a subsidiary of Rossi Industries," Dominic said, "run by my capable wife." Preston's hands shook as he picked up the pen. He looked at Audrey one last time. "I loved you. You know." He lied. "No." "Preston," Audrey said, standing up and buttoning her coat. "You loved owning me. There's a difference." He signed the papers. Dominic snatched them up before the ink was dry. "Pleasure doing business," Dominic said. He offered his arm to Audrey. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Rossi. The nursery painters are coming at 2 o'clock. Yes, darling, Audrey beamed. They walked out of the boardroom, leaving Preston Calloway sitting alone in the ruins of his life, staring at the empty chair where his wife and his future used to be. As they reached the elevator, Audrey leaned into Dominic. "Did you see his face?" she whispered. "I did." Dominic kissed her forehead. "But the best part is yet to come." "What's that?" "Raising a son who will be everything Preston Calloway never was. A good man." Audrey smiled, resting her hand on her bump. The baby kicked. The summer storm broke over Lake Michigan with the violence of a cannon blast, rattling the reinforced glass of the Rossi estate. The sky was a bruising purple, illuminated by jagged veins of lightning that turned the night into day for split seconds. Inside the master suite, the atmosphere was just as volatile. Audrey gripped the silk sheets, her knuckles turning white as another contraction ripped through her. It wasn't just pain, it was a physical tearing of her past from her future. She was sweating, her hair plastered to her forehead, the carefully curated Mafia wife facade completely stripped away to reveal raw, human vulnerability. "I can't," she gasped, her voice cracking. "Dominic, I can't do this. I'm not strong enough." Dominic Rossi was not a man who panicked. He was a man who negotiated with cartels and stared down federal indictments without blinking. But seeing Audrey in this state, seeing the woman who had become his entire world writhing in agony, unnerved him in a way a gun to the head never could. He sat on the edge of the bed, ignoring the team of private doctors and nurses moving efficiently around them. He took her hand, his large, rough palm engulfing her trembling fingers. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice a low rumble that cut through the noise of the storm outside. Audrey opened her eyes, finding his steel-grey gaze. "You survived, Preston Calloway," Dominic said, wiping a stray hair from her face with infinite tenderness. "You survived the humiliation. You survived the press. You survived me. Do not tell me you cannot do this. Audrey, you are the strongest thing in this house." "What if—" She choked on a sob, lowering her voice so the doctors wouldn't hear. "What if he looks like him? What if you look at this baby and see Preston?" This was the fear that had haunted her for 9 months, the biological reality that this child was, by blood, a Calloway, an heir to a man Dominic despised. Dominic leaned in close, his lips brushing her ear. "Blood is just chemistry. Audrey, loyalty is a choice. This child is yours. That makes him mine. Anyone who says otherwise answers to me." Another contraction hit, harder this time. Dr. Evans, the head of obstetrics from Northwestern, whom Dominic had essentially kidnapped with a very large paycheck to perform the delivery at the estate, stepped forward. "It's time, Mrs. Rossi. One more big push, on my count." The next 10 minutes were a blur of agony and noise. The thunder outside seemed to synchronize with her efforts, a symphony of chaos. Audrey screamed, a raw, primal sound that echoed through the marble halls of the mansion. It was the sound of a woman expelling the last of her weakness. And then, silence. Sudden, absolute silence. Audrey collapsed back against the pillows, her chest heaving. Panic flared in her chest. Why was it silent? Then, a cry. High, clear, and furious. A sound of life announcing itself to the world. "It's a boy." "Doctor," Evans announced, his voice filled with professional relief. He quickly cleaned the infant, wrapping him in a soft white blanket before placing the small, squirming bundle onto Audrey's chest. Audrey looked down, Her vision was blurry with tears. The baby was tiny, red-faced, and screaming his lungs out. He had a tuft of dark hair and fists that were already clenched, as if ready to fight the world. She touched his cheek, her fingers trembling. The instant her skin touched his, the fear vanished. It didn't matter who the biological father was. This was her son. He's beautiful, she whispered. She looked up at Dominic. This was the moment of truth. Dominic stood over the bed. He looked at the screaming infant. His face was unreadable, a mask of stone. He studied the shape of the eyes, the chin, the nose. He was looking for the enemy. He was looking for Preston Calloway in the features of this innocent life. The room held its breath. The nurses stopped moving. Even the storm outside seemed to pause. Dominic reached out a large, tattooed finger. The baby, sensing the presence, stopped crying. His tiny, erratic hand flailed out and instinctively grabbed Dominic's finger, wrapping his entire fist around the single digit. He held on tight. Dominic's mask cracked. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face, an expression so rare that Audrey felt her heart skip a beat. "He has your grip," Dominic murmured, "and your fire." "He doesn't look like—" Audrey started, but she couldn't say the name. "He looks like a Rossi," Dominic interrupted firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. "He looks like the future." "What should we name him?" Audrey asked, exhaustion finally pulling at her eyelids. Dominic didn't hesitate. He had decided months ago. "Roman," Dominic said, "because he will build an empire on the ashes of the old one." 5 years had passed. The city of Chicago had changed. The skyline was different, dominated now by the gleaming spire of Rossi Calloway Tower, a monument to a hostile takeover that was still studied in business schools as the most brutal acquisition in the city's history. But in a small, cramped apartment in the Englewood neighborhood, time seemed to have stopped, or rather, decayed. Preston Calloway sat on a sagging couch that smelled of stale beer and mildew. He was 38, but he looked 50. His once golden hair was thinning and greasy. His face was gaunt, the sharp jawline now hidden under a patchy, unkempt beard. He wasn't the CEO of Calloway Logistics anymore. He was a night shift inventory clerk at an Amazon warehouse. He spent his days sleeping and his evenings drinking cheap whiskey, trying to drown the memory of the life he had thrown away. The television in the corner flickered. It was the only luxury he had left. The 6 p.m. news was on. "Tonight marks the 5th anniversary of the Rossi Foundation's Fresh Start initiative," the reporter said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "The gala is being held at the former Calloway estate, now the primary residence of the Rossi family." Preston flinched. He reached for the remote to turn it off, but his hand froze. The camera panned to the podium. There she was. Audrey. She didn't look like the frightened girl he had married. She didn't look like the broken woman he had kicked out in the rain. She looked like a queen. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet, diamonds dripping from her ears. Her posture was erect, commanding. She radiated a power that Preston had never seen in her. Beside her stood Dominic Rossi. The years had been kind to him. The grey at his temples only made him look more distinguished, more dangerous. He stood with his hand resting possessively on the small of Audrey's back. But it was the boy standing between them that made the air leave Preston's lungs. 5-year-old Roman Rossi. The boy was a miniature version of the power couple. He was wearing a tiny, custom-tailored tuxedo. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, mimicking Dominic's stance perfectly. The camera zoomed in on the boy's face as he laughed at something the photographer said. Preston squinted, leaning forward until his nose was inches from the cracked screen. The whiskey bottle slipped from his hand, thumping onto the carpet, spilling amber liquid that he didn't even notice. The boy had blue eyes, Callaway blue. He had a dimple in his left cheek when he smiled. Preston's dimple. A cold, horrifying realization washed over Preston. It started in his stomach and clawed its way up his throat. He remembered the fertility doctor, Dr. Arrington. He remembered the bribe he had paid to falsify the records so he could annul the marriage without losing half his assets. He had lied to everyone, including himself, that Audrey was the broken one. He isn't adopted, Preston thought, his mind reeling. That's my son, on the screen. Roman tugged on Dominic's jacket. Dominic knelt down, ignoring the flashing cameras and the dignitaries. He listened to whatever the boy whispered, then threw his head back and laughed a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. Dominic picked the boy up, swinging him onto his hip, and Roman wrapped his arms around Dominic's neck, burying his face in his father's shoulder. The look of adoration in the boy's eyes was absolute. That was his dad. That was his hero. Preston sank back into the couch, burying his face in his hands. A guttural sound of anguish ripped from his throat. He hadn't just lost his company. He hadn't just lost his wife. He had lost his immortality. He had thrown his own son, his own flesh and blood, into the arms of his greatest enemy. And Dominic Rossi hadn't just raised him. He had loved him. He had turned a Callaway into a Rossi. The ultimate revenge wasn't death. It was replacement. Total, absolute replacement. Preston stared at the screen until the segment ended, leaving him alone in the dark, silent apartment. The gala was winding down. The last of the limousines were pulling away down the long, winding driveway. The staff was quietly clearing the champagne flutes. Audrey walked out onto the massive stone balcony. The rain had started again. A gentle, rhythmic tapping against the limestone. It was cold, but she didn't feel it. She felt a warmth behind her. Dominic wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He rested his chin on her shoulder, his presence a heavy, comforting weight. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "The rain," Audrey said, leaning into him. "I used to hate it. For a long time, the sound of rain just sounded like suitcase wheels on pavement. It reminded me of being trash. And now," Dominic asked, his hands moving to rest over her stomach, not because she was pregnant, but just to hold her. "Now," she turned in his arms, looking up at him, her eyes reflecting the city lights. "It reminds me of the night my life actually began. It reminds me of the Rolls-Royce, pulling up to the curb." "Roman is asleep," Dominic said. He was exhausted. He asked if he could come to the construction site with me tomorrow. He wants to see the cranes. "He wants to be just like you," Audrey smiled, tracing the line of Dominic's jaw. "Good," Dominic said. He looked serious for a moment. "I know he isn't mine by blood, Audrey. I know that haunts you sometimes." "It doesn't," she promised. "It shouldn't," Dominic said fiercely. "Because blood is just biology. Being a father is a promise. And I have kept my promise." He kissed her, deep and slow, a kiss that tasted of victory and scotch. "Preston is out there somewhere," Dominic whispered against her lips. "I know where he lives. I know what he does. I have eyes on him, always. Tonight, I made sure the cameras got a good shot of Roman. I wanted him to see. Audrey pulled back slightly, surprised. You knew he would be watching. I wanted him to know that he didn't just lose. Dominic's eyes were dark, glinting with a terrifying satisfaction. I wanted him to know that I won everything he was too weak to keep. His money, his wife, his son. Audrey looked at this man, this monster, this savior, this husband. He was ruthless. He was cruel to his enemies. But he had given her a life she never dreamed possible. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his steady, powerful heart. You aren't the broken girl anymore, Audrey, he whispered into her hair. No, she agreed, looking out over the wet, glittering expanse of Chicago, a city they now owned, a kingdom for their son. I'm not the victim. I'm the storm. Dominic Rossi smiled in the shadows. The king and queen of Chicago stood together, unbreakable, while the rest of the world just got wet.